Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and today I'm going to do the AVA Leather Wrap bracelet for you. The leather wrap bracelet is a pretty standard bracelet that I've done a number of different videos on. Here's the crystal one. We've done some with Tila's and some other ones there. I wanted to show you guys how to do them with our new AVA bead. If you need any of the materials to do this AVA Bead Leather Wrap, in the top corner of the video here, there's a little eye. If you click on that, that's information from us, the video producer. And then I'll have links for you guys to purchase some of the materials if you need them. We're also going to be making mixed packs of the AVA beads, so that way if you do want to follow along and make the bracelet or do some of the other designs with a mixture of the AVAs, we're going to have 20 packs of different colors. So you'll have 2 of each of kind of your different colors that you can play around with, and then you can design and create. This idea actually was Ashley's, who works with us at the Potomac Bead Company, and she made one, and by request we have gotten in the supplies to make the mixed packs for you guys and do this video because it's been such a hit on the top banner of our website. So I wanted to go ahead and make this AVA wrap bracelet for you. My color order is going to be a little bit different than Ashley's was, so you can kind of play around, but it's going to be the same base of those metallic kind of satiny colors of the AVA bead. Again, if you need any of the materials, the top little eye. So for the AVA beads, we sell them currently in packs of 20 or factory packs of 100. For this particular bracelet, you're going to need between 16 and 20 beads. So you get a mixed pack if you do want to buy a mixed pack of the AVA beads with 2 of each color. So you're going to get 10 different colors, 2 of each color. I'm going to end up probably only using about 16 of the AVA beads in my bracelet. I have 18 kind of pictured here, which is going to be a very standard length for most of you. In addition to the AVA beads, I have a diamond duo that I'm going to put in the middle. If you don't want to do a diamond duo, you'll have a lot of options in the middle. You could put a crystal in the middle, you can keep it open, but you will see a little bit of thread, so I'll kind of go over that with you guys, what you want to use in the middle of it. And it's just one of the diamond duo beads. I have here that jade color because I'm also going to be using a jade cup button to clasp the bracelet and to close it off. In addition to our AVA beads and our diamond duo in the middle, I also have 11O seed beads here in the crystal Labrador finish. So that is a check coating on the Miyuki seed bead. So I have the crystal Labrador, and I'm going to need enough basically to go in between each of my AVA beads. So if you're looking at a max of 20, you're going to need 40 of those plus some for the middle. So about 50 or so of your crystal lab seed beads will do it for you. In addition to that, I have my thread, my needles, and my leather. So for my thread, I'm using 0.006 Wildfire beading thread in my green color. That's going to go in between all of the beads as I kind of go back and forth. The leather that I'm choosing to use is a 1mm leather, and this is an Indian leather in light brown, which I think will kind of stay along with that brighter color. Versus if you want something a little bit darker, here's the brown color to show you what it would be like against it. And then I do have a needle here, a size 10 or a size 12 beading needle will work for you. The other tools that I have handy are, I have some super glue glue because you're going to want that to kind of glue down the back of your knot at the end of your leather. And I also have a thread burner. I happen to have the Thread Zap 2 here. There's also the Thread Zap Ultra or the Bead-Align cord cutter. They all do the same thing. It's just nice to get you nice and close to your project with the thread burner since you are working with the thread. The other tool that I like to have handy is a pliers. And I like the pliers to flatten out the end of my thread once I burn it off my spool, so that way it makes it easier to thread the needle. To start out, you may also want to have a scissors handy if you don't have a wire cutters, because you are going to need to cut your leather if you have the leather in a bag or a grouping. So we're going to get ready to get started. Like I said, if you want to have a scissors or a cutter with you too, we're going to start with the very beginning of it, going over how to do the leather and the measurement of that. And then we're going to go in and sew in our AVA beads. So to get started, the first thing that we want to do is get ready with our leather. I should say to get started, what I did was I laid out my AVA beads from that mix pack in an order that I liked, deciding which color kind of to keep out and what order I wanted to do it. Because I'm using that kind of jadish turquoise color, I used it in the center and then kind of halfway through, and then I'll use it at the cup button at the very end. But to start out, I have my leather. So how much leather to cut is kind of the question. If you want to do it that it's a single wrap, which with the AVA bead I would suggest, you're going to measure your wrist and take the leather around the wrist 2 times. That's because you're going to have a channel. The leather is going to be doubled on your wrist because it needs a top and a bottom. In addition to double your wrist, you also want a little bit of playroom that it's not super tight against your wrist. In addition to that, you also need enough to make a knot on either end. So when I cut my leather, I usually just kind of grab a wire cutter that I have here or a scissors, either one will work, especially with this thin leather. And I'm going to cut double the length of my wrist plus an additional 6 inches. That's an additional 3 inches on each side to be used again for that starter knot as well as for the ending. When I say double my wrist size, again, I'm not doing it tight on my wrist. I'm kind of holding it because again, I don't want it to be tight on my wrist when I make it. So I double it there, giving myself a little bit of an extra playroom. So the finished length of the bracelet, which in my case is going to be about 6 3/4, in your case it might be 7 inches. And then I add the additional 3 inches on each side. So that's how you're going to know exactly how much of your leather to get started with. In addition to my leather, which I've cut, I have my needle and thread ready to go. For the thread, I always start out most projects with about 5 feet of my beading thread. We also have the thread in some really fun colors, whether or not you want some KO, some 1G, some of the new Hannah thread. So if you do want to see a little bit of color on the outside, other than just the Wildfire colors, those threads would be great to use in this as well. Whatever thread you decide, go ahead and get 5 inches of that thread onto your needle. I'm not doubling over the thread the whole way. I'm just doubling it over about halfway. That way I don't have as much to pull through the beads because it's just going to be one piece of thread going through. I'm not doubling the thread. So if you're new to beading, this long piece here that I have that is doubled is just a tail, so that way I don't have to pull all the thread through. So I have my leather ready to go. I have my needle and my thread ready to go. And I have my button out on my mat here. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually make a loop. The loop, I'm going to make sure can fit my button inside of it. So I have my thread and needle here, just kind of hanging out in my mat. And then I have my leather. If you do have leather that is thin enough to go through your button, if you're using a button, you can actually start with the button end. That's kind of up to you. But I would suggest starting with your loop end. You're going to double the leather so that the ends are meeting at the very end. And we're going to go back and we're just going to tie an overhand knot, holding the 2 ends together, and just feed that loop through itself. Give a little pull. So we're just doing that knot right there on the end of the leather. I'm going to pull the knot tight when I know that it sits comfortable through my cup button. So there I have it kind of sitting comfortably through my button. From here now, you just want to make sure that you still have an equal piece of leather coming off of each end. I'm now going to get ready to attach the thread to the leather. So with the thread, I actually have my needle end. I'm going to go to the very opposite end. So pull all that thread through, and I'm going to the very opposite end of the thread. Take the thread around both pieces of leather below the knot and simply tie the thread around those 2 pieces. You want to do that with 1 knot and take the thread to the opposite side. So basically taking it around one more time around that loop and I'm going to tie a knot again and get that in there. You can see I have a little bit of a tail, about a 1-inch tail or a 1/2 inch tail there after the knot. That is just so I could hold on and create the knot. Eventually what we'll do is we'll do a little dab of glue there, and then I'll take my thread burner and burn down all that extra thread. If this starts to kind of come apart, that it doesn't want to stay, you can do an additional knot after. That's kind of up to you. Pull nice and tight. If you have your pliers handy that you flattened out your thread with to get your needle on, you can also do a nice tight grab with that. From here, basically, our setup is complete. We're going to get ready now to start adding in our AVA beads. And I'm starting out, and I kind of made them lay out in the order that I want them to go. Keep in mind that as you are building, they're going to get more separated and more space in between them, because we have an 11-0 that is going to sit in between each of our beads. So it's going to extend these beads out a little bit here and add about 1 inch or so to each side of those. So if you have a tiny wrist, you may want to start out with just 16 of your AVA beads. If you know that you have pretty standard, about 18. If you know you have a bigger wrist, you want to start out with 20 of those AVA beads in your design. So to get started, I am going to basically get ready by dumping out some of my 11-0 seed beads here onto my mat and get that pile ready. And then we'll get ready to actually string on and to start our bracelet. So to start out, I have my needle and thread, and it's tied on again to that leather. If you want, and you have a clipboard or a hemp project board, you can actually put that on, put the end of the knot here onto the project board and extend the 2 pieces of leather, since you'll be working on them as a channel, adding the beads in between the channel. What I'm going to do is hold it for you guys so you can see it a little bit better. What I'm going to do is start out by getting that channel with just some of my 11-0 seed beads. So the first thing I'm going to do is put on one of my 11-0 seed beads and let that drop down near your thread here, near that knot. I'm going to then separate the leather a little bit, and I want the seed bead to sit so that the ends or the holes of the bead are perpendicular to the leather. With your needle and thread, then take your leather over the top, or your thread over top of the leather on the right hand side, go underneath the leather and back through that 11-0 seed bead with your needle exiting the leather on the left hand side on the top. What this is going to do is create a loop then around the leather and secure the seed bead in place. From there, I'm going to take this leather, I'm on top of the left-hand leather, I'm going to take the thread over the top of that same leather, underneath and through that same 11-0 seed bead, so that I have another piece of my green thread on the opposite side of the leather. So you're going to end up here with a piece of the thread that you see on the right and a piece of thread that you see on the left. Because this is my first bead, I'm going to push it down close to that knot and do a nice little grab and make sure that bead is securely in there. From here, the leather is coming out over the top of the leather on the thread is coming out rather over the top of the leather on the left-hand side. You want to take your thread and needle around that piece of leather on the left. So it's going to be in a diagonal fashion. Add 2 of your 11-0 seed beads and let them fall into that empty channel. Pushing them down there. Take the thread and needle then. We're always going over the top first and then underneath the leather, back through those 11-0 seed beads and then the needle and thread are going to go above the leather on the right hand side. And give a tight pull, and then I'll pull that in there. So you can see that you have the leather catching on, or the thread catching on the leather on the left hand side, but we don't have it catching on the right. Remember, it just kind of came down there on the diagonal. So the leather and thread now are sitting right on top of one another. I want the green thread to go over the top of the leather like we've been doing. Take the needle under the leather, back through those two 11-0 seed beads, and out above the leather on the other side. That's going to get a piece of thread that secures the seed beads on both sides. The thread now is coming out on the left-hand side. So the last time we got this thread secured, and it had the kind of two pieces going through it, the thread was coming out on the right-hand side, and we did that kind of diagonal down. Now we're coming off on the left-hand side. Every other bead and every other hole that we go through is going to be opposite. This thread now is going to come over the top of the left-hand thread or leather and come out the middle. If I wanted to, I could increase and add 3 beads now, or I could even just continue with 2 seed beads at a time. At this point though, I'm going to get ready to actually add in my first of my AVA beads. On the sides of the AVAs, always on the point, I'm going to add one 11-0 seed bead on either side. So picking up my thread and needle here, I'm going to add an 11, sew through that top of the AVA bead. So I'm sewing through the A side of that AVA bead. So when I go into it, I'm going to sew through the A, push that all down. And then because I'm coming out the AVA on the other side, I want to add another 11-0 seed bead. And let that fall into the channel. So instead of adding 3 seed beads, I added 11-0, AVA 11-0. The thread and needle, I want to come over the leather on the right-hand side. Needle and thread then go under the leather, back through the 11 AVA 11, and come out above the leather on the left-hand side. When I have that, you kind of want to position this first AVA. Is a little bit tricky, and I think this is why some people have asked for the video. That first AVA, you want to pull that thread tight and make sure that the AVA is kind of cooperating. So we have the thread now coming out on the right-hand side and going around the leather. We don't yet on the left, so you need to go through, you need to go through your AVA beads one more time. So the leather goes over the top, and I'm kind of anal retentive about this, which I'm not in many things beading. But with my leather wraps, I always like the leather to go over the top first and then underneath. It just makes for a much cleaner project. Go through then your 11, AVA 11. If you want the AVA beads to stick out more, you can also use 15s. And you're going to go over the top again of the leather on that left-hand side. And there you have the start of it. So you've got your first AVA in place. Now the thread's going to be exposed on the side, just like it's been on the top where we went and we kind of had that zigzag or that Z creation on the left or on the right, and then we had it on the left. We're going to have it now again on the right-hand side. So we're going to go underneath our leather so that the needle and thread are coming out in the middle of the leather. Add an 11-0 seed bead on and sew through the first bottom leg of the AVA. That's on the same side, so that right leg. And it's just going to kind of sit there for a second. From there, I'm picking up my next of my AVA beads, and I'm going to add an 11, AVA 11 and sew through the opposite side of that AVA. And if you happen to get twisted around the leather like I am, you just pull that leather out of the way. That's going to pull in our next of our AVA beads and the next of the pattern. On the side then of the AVA, we want to repeat what we did by adding an 11-0 seed bead in. I'm going to kind of turn it to the side here because I'll show you guys realistically when you're working it, if you do like to hold it, you're going to turn it back and forth. If you're on a clipboard, you may not. As you get further along, it gets easier and easier to handle. So again, I have my 11-0 on the side of my AVA. My thread and needle are going over the top of the leather, underneath the leather, and then retracing that 11-0 AVA 11-0. If you want to, you could put the AVAs right inside of one another. I like the pop of the metal color by adding the 11s. Through the AVA, there in the middle. And the way that AVAs are drilled, you'll have to go step by step like this. You're not going to be able to go the whole way straight through. When you get to the other side then, you're going to go through the 11, the AVA 11. Make sure you're coming out above the leather. I'll turn it back for this way for you guys. So you can see that kind of traps it inside there and gets it going. On this right hand side then, you can see that you have the AVA in between the AVA before it. So it's going to be a constant building then, as every time you get to the second hole or the middle hole, you're adding your next AVA color. There's always an 11-0 before each of the AVA V's, as well as before each of the AVA little stems there. On this right hand side, I don't have any thread exposed over the leather, so you know it's time to still go over that leather with the thread, and then retrace one more time back through your project. You can also see, if you're not sure if you need to go back through it one more time, you can see exactly where the last little zigzag line was, and mine was on the right, so I know this other one has to be on the left. Some people don't go back through the beads again when they're doing the leather wrap. I always suggest it because it makes the project sit a lot nicer. I'm going to go back through now and keep it coming, and the piece of thread is long, so you probably are going to get twisted up a little bit in your leather. Just move it out of the way. Once I'm coming out then on the left hand side, what I'm going to do is get ready to add my next of my AVA beads. If you're not sure on the size that you need and how many AVA beads you need to add, what I would suggest is you can also start in the middle of the project. In that case, I definitely would use a project board or a bead stopper. You're just going to cut 2 pieces of leather rather than one. Kind of start in the middle, work your way back on one side, and work your way back on the other side. Coming out this side, then I still need to go through one more seed bead. One more 11-0 right there. And when I'm through the 11-0, I'm going to make sure that I'm coming out to the top of my leather. From there then, that leather is going to go around, or the thread's going to go around the leather on the left-hand side and underneath, and get ready to add in your next of your AVA beads. Before you add the AVAs in the middle, put on an 11-0, go through the AVA, add your next color of AVA, put on your 11-0, and continue with your stitch, adding in your AVAs, building up towards the middle. So as I continue, you can kind of see my color pattern getting spread out there and increasing in size. Like I said, if you want to, you can go in right from one to the other. That'll make them closer. You could use 15 seed beads if you want, if you do want to make it a little bit narrower on your wrist. The one thing I want to kind of caution everybody and make sure of is that as you're doing the bracelet, you want to make sure that your leather is pulled tight and that it's not kind of curving to one side. And make sure that the zigzags that you have are an equal amount of thread and that you're not kind of favoring one side to another. So as you come through, just kind of make sure that if you're looking at your loop, that your beads are sitting right nice and next to one another. And you can see that the more or the bigger seed bead you use, the more length it's going to put between each one of the beads. So that's kind of up to you exactly what you want to do and how you want to create. But I'm getting ready now to add my next bead, which is my copper bead. So I'm now to the middle of my bracelet here, and I want to add in my diamond duo bead. So I'm coming out my violet AVA there, and I have my diamond duo on so that the bubble side, or kind of the almost faceted look sign, is facing up with an 11/0 seed bead on each side. I'm going to continue my leather wrap just as if I would be adding an AVA bead. From here then I put on my 11/0, just continuing like normal. So over the top and underneath, go back and reinforce. And you could continue your bracelet here the whole way if you wanted to, that the AVAs are facing the same way. In Ashley's design, and I think what people really like, is that they kind of go on the opposites of each other and they switch in the middle. If you did not want an AVA, or if you did not want a diamond duo, you could use a super duo, you can use a round duo. Anything with 2 holes would work to get it in the same fashion that I'm working with here. If you want to keep the holes empty and you don't want to see any of the extra thread, what you'd have to do is use your 11/0 as kind of a stopper. So I have my thread twisted here. I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. Pull my leather out so it gets untwisted. And continue on. So if you didn't want that diamond duo in the middle of your project, what you would have to do is sew through the 11/0, adding it onto your thread, sew through the AVA bead and 11/0. Go back up through those right away, not going through the 11/0, which is going to put the 11/0 kind of just hanging out there in the middle. It's going to act as a stop bead. Go back the opposite way, add your AVA on the other side, come down through those as well. From there, then, to get to the bottom section, you're going to need to go 1 AVA back and then kind of swing back around and sew these in. This is why I think it's a lot easier just to add the diamond duo in the middle. The other thing that you can do is just add some seed beads in the middle if you don't have a diamond duo handy, or if you don't want to use a diamond duo. You can just use an extra seed bead or 2 in that place. When I'm coming off the project then, and I'm getting ready to transpose and kind of do them the opposite way, I'm going to come off just as if I'm getting ready to start my next design. And instead of putting on an 11/0 and going through an AVA that's already there, I'm going to put on 11/0 and grab the AVA. This time I'll be grabbing them first through the legs of the AVA. From there, when I'm in the middle, I'm going to grab an 11/0, sew through the second hole of the diamond duo bead. And I lost my 11/0 there. And I'm going to add an 11/0 on either side. So it's really pretty self-explanatory. You're just doing the same thing with the same pattern, just adding in the diamond duo in the middle. And then when you come off the other side, you get to switch which direction the AVA is going. Like I said, if you want to keep it going the same direction, that's kind of up to you. I like the fact that it has a middle and almost has an eye to it. So once you have that in there, you're going to go ahead then and come back through and back around. And you can see now I'm just getting ready to continue on with my design, going the opposite direction and adding in the rest of my AVA beads. So just to show you a little bit more detail when you're coming back this other way here, the pattern that you're adding is that you're adding an 11-0, one of the legs of the AVA beads, 11-0, and then sewing to the other side of the top of the AVA bead. And that kind of pulls that in there. When you're coming out then the other side, you have to add an 11-0, sew through the other leg of the AVA, and add an 11-0. Again, as you are continuing, just kind of make sure that your leather is not pulling one way or the other, and that you're going in a nice straight line, continuing to go over the top of the leather, sew underneath, and bring it back through, making sure that those zigzags are happening on every other side of the leather. So I'm here at the end of the bracelet and I have all of my AVA beads lined up in there and in their rows. And I ended up doing 18 AVA beads, which, like I said, from my wrist, about 16 AVA beads would have gone really well. 18 is going to be about standard by the time I go in and add the button and all of that. And then 20 if you have a little bit bigger of a wrist. So this is going to be a little bit big for me, but I wanted to make it standard size for you guys. So when you get to the end, basically what we're going to be doing is pinching the leather and creating that V again, just in a backwards fashion. To do so, my thread and needle are going to come out the middle of the leather, just like we've been doing. Add an 11-0 on the seed bead, or onto the needle and thread. Sew through the AVA bead through the top hole. Add another 11-0 and sew over the leather, under, and back through all of those beads. Again, go over the leather, under, and back through that grouping of 3. From here, you want to make sure that your leather is sitting nice and flat. And as you pull the leather together, you want to make sure also, as much as possible, to keep that V right in the middle and not have it pulled over to one side or the other. From here, I'm going to go back to the grouping of 2 11-0 seed beads and then downgrade to 1 11-0 seed beads. So 2 go on, they go in between the middle at the very top of the AVA bead. So your thread over the leather, then under and through the beads, over, under, through, and then go under, add your last 11-0 seed bead, kind of push that down in there, then same deal with the over, under the leather, through the seed bead. Make sure you have the thread coming out on both sides, just like we've been doing. You can, with your fingers, and if you want, do a little push down and just make it so that it's nice and centered along the AVA V. So now to add the button to the end of the AVA leather wrap, I'm going to take my thread and needle, which is coming out of my last seed bead, and I'm going to just kind of push it off to the side, and we're going to tie a knot in our leather. And you might have a little bit more than I have because I wasn't planning on naturally doing a bracelet that was a little bit bigger. So I have my knot, and it's just an overhand knot or a double knot, and push that down. Again, if you have a button that is big enough to go through the loops of the leather, if you have a button with a shank along the back, you can simply take it through the back of the shank of the button and then tie again on the other side. In this case, I want to use a cup button. Unfortunately, the cup button doesn't go through the leather. If you are using a 0.5 millimeter, the cup button will fit through. But because I'm using a 1 millimeter, the holes are 1 millimeter, they just don't fit. Now that I have the knot there, what I'm going to do is take this thread that I have remaining on, and I'm going to tie it in a loop style and a knot around the leather right at the base of the knot. So again, we're literally mirroring the other side. On the other side, instead of having the two thread ends hanging out, though, we have our loop. From here, I'm literally going to sew my button onto the actual project. To sew the button on, I'm going up through the cup button, down through the cup button. If you want to, which I'm going to do, I'm going to add 3 11-0 seed beads and then sew down the cup button. And when you go around the knot, I want to go from the side of the AVA beads to the side of the open leather. I'm going to sew through the two pieces of leather, kind of separating, oh, I'm getting tangled, separating those cords. So I'm going to sew through the two pieces of leather. Give a nice tight pull and kind of pull your button almost right on top of the knot. Take your thread and needle back around now to reinforce that, and to sew back onto the button, go back into that first hole of the button again, and that's going to pull that thread, you can see, right kind of in between the knot. So down through this, and I'm going to do this 3 times, reinforcing the actual knot and the loop that I'm doing. So I'm sewing through here, and if you can sew on a button, you can do this. If you want to, and you can also go kind of underneath the thread, so you're literally just sewing the button on. Give a nice tight pull. Go up through the button one more time, making sure that it's nice and securely in place. After you get the button completed and reinforced, you can go back through the actual project and kind of sew down if you want. What I do is I simply tie a knot. So I'll show you guys how I do that. I'm just going to take the end of my thread here, give a nice tight pull, go underneath one of these thread ends, make a loop, sew through that loop 2 times. So I'll go through create a loop, take my needle and thread, sew through it 1, 2 times. From there, then I'm going to take my thread ends again, and you can simply tie 1 more knot, or you can cut them down a little bit. You can cut them down a little bit so that way you have kind of a little bit exposed, or you can cut it down flush to the bottom of the button. What this will do then is allow the button to sit up a little bit, and it'll sit right above that knot that you've created. At this point here, you're actually finished your bracelet. All you do is take a little bit of your glue, go over the knots that you create at the bottom and at the top of the project here. Once you have the glue on there, you can grab your thread burner or your thread zap and kind of zap those down nice and close to the project, creating a little stop on either side. And kind of push that out of the way, push that down. And then I like to keep a little bit of leather on my project, kind of has that organic look. I'm going to leave it have just a little bit of a tail. Again, at this point, we are completely finished our fun AVA leather wrap. So I want to thank Ashley for doing this fun kind of design during creative time and getting the color mix of the AVAs out there to you guys. We're excited to do that and to be able to do that now that we have a sufficient on-hand quantity. Again, if you need any of the materials, you can go back to the beginning of the video to that little eye at the top corner of the video, press on that. Or always, additionally, we have it that at the bottom of the video, there's a description that says what the video is about. It also usually has the date that the video was produced and some more facts as well. And you can then go in and click there and get all the links to order the projects from me online. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel so you get regular updates on things like the AVA bead, which is our newest bead that we brought to you, as well as new designs like this one, and also to stay connected with the rest of the beading world. You can also join us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Check us out at PotomacBeads.com, as well as join our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making, which is a fun interactive forum for people with questions, ideas, examples, solutions, great tips. So get on there, check that out, and enjoy, everybody, because it really is a fun and active group. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching this fun AVA leather wrap bracelet, and have fun creating.